For 20 years, I, Sarah Grace Miller, have been the first lady of the largest church in Texas. People see me looking radiant in the very front row, beside a man the entire world hails as a living saint. But no one knows that at night, I live with a demon. David Miller, my husband, the great pastor to his congregation, destroyed me with wounds that do not bleed, and also stole millions of dollars from the very charity fund he created to support his string of beautiful, young mistresses. He believed I would stay silent, that I was born only to serve as the backdrop for his fraudulent throne. Until the day Maria Rodriguez, our ever-loyal accountant, placed a trembling file directly into my hands. Inside contained it all, the receipts, the accounts, the utterly undeniable proof. As my fingers tightened around those papers, my heart knew, either I would be buried alive with him, or I would drag him to his grave first. And then, in a cruel twist of fate, the very next day, he called me onto the stage before 20,000 people. He smiled, believing I would again be the perfect doll, gently bowing my head beneath the stage lights. But that day, in my hand was not a speech full of praise, but rather the death sentence meant for him. He expected me to submit, but it is he, before the entire world, who will be the one to kneel. He awaited the familiar submission, as if I were only an ornamental piece beside his golden throne. But he was wrong. Upon the very throne he built with his lies, the truth will pull him down and force him to kneel at the feet of the crowd that once worshipped him. The smile was the hardest part. It had to be sculpted, a piece of art carefully crafted each Sunday morning. It couldn't be too wide, that would seem manic. It couldn't be too thin, that would betray the hollowness I felt inside. It had to be just right, serene, beatific, the kind of smile that belonged on the face of a woman married to a man who spoke for God. My name is Sarah Grace Miller, and for 20 years, I had been the first lady of the Kingdom of Light Tabernacle, the largest megachurch in the state of Texas. My reflection in the polished marble of the master bathroom vanity stared back at me, a stranger in a familiar shell. The pearls around my neck felt like a soft, elegant chokehold. The navy blue silk dress, modest and expensive, felt like a uniform. Every piece of me was a prop in the grand production that was my husband, Pastor David Miller. "Are you ready, my love?" David's voice, smooth as honey and twice as sweet, echoed from the bedroom. It was his public voice, the one that could coax thousands of dollars from the wallets of his flock and bring tears to their eyes with a single, well-timed pause. I took one last look at the woman in the mirror. Her eyes were tired. I forced the smile into place. "Coming, David." He stood by the window, already dressed in his tailored suit, a Bible in one hand. The morning light caught the silver in his perfectly coiffed hair, making him look like a modern-day apostle. He was handsome, charismatic, a force of nature, and a complete and utter fraud. "You look beautiful, Sarah Grace." "A true testament to God's grace," he said, his eyes scanning me not with affection but with the critical gaze of a director checking his lead actress's costume. "The blue is perfect. It speaks of loyalty and calm. The congregation will feel that." Everything was about the congregation, about the performance. He kissed my forehead, a dry, passionless gesture that was more for his own sense of righteousness than for me. "Caleb and Hannah are waiting downstairs. Let's not be late." Punctuality is a form of respect for God's time. Our children. Caleb, 20, was a younger, more earnest version of his father. He was the head of the youth ministry, his eyes shining with a blind devotion that broke my heart. He saw his father as a hero, a giant of faith. Then there was Hannah, 18, our quiet rebel. She saw the cracks. She didn't say much, but her silence was heavy with questions, her eyes sharp with a skepticism she inherited from the woman I used to be. Downstairs, the house was silent except for the low hum of the industrial-grade refrigerator. Our home, a sprawling mansion paid for by the church, Love and Compassion Fund, felt more like a museum than a place where a family lived. Caleb stood by the door, his Bible tucked under his arm. "Morning, Mom. You look great." "Dad," Elder Abernathy called. He said the preliminary numbers for the new mission in Uganda are looking higher than projected. David waved a dismissive hand. "The Lord's work requires the Lord's resources, son. Thomas worries too much. He's a good man, but he lacks vision." Elder Thomas Abernathy. He was one of the few original elders left from before David transformed our small community church into a corporate spiritual empire. He had kind, worried eyes and a handshake that felt genuine. He was the only one who ever asked me, "And how are you, Sarah Grace? Truly." I always gave him the practiced smile and the scripted answer. Hannah was at the kitchen island, scrolling through her phone, pointedly ignoring the religious theater around her. She wore jeans and a band t-shirt, a clear violation of the unspoken Sunday morning dress code. "Hannah, you are not wearing that to the house of the Lord," David said, his voice losing a fraction of its honeyed tone. "It's just clothes, Dad," she mumbled, not looking up. "It is a sign of disrespect. Go and change. Now." "David, let her be," I said softly, stepping between them. It was a familiar dance. He turned his gaze on me, and for a second the mask slipped. I saw the cold anger in his eyes, the impatience. It was the same look he gave me last Tuesday when I questioned a credit card bill for a $5,000 charge at a jewelry store. "This is a matter of family discipline, Sarah Grace. Do not undermine my authority, especially not on the Lord's Day." He then turned back to Hannah. "Your mother is being too soft. Go, change, or you will not be joining us." Hannah slammed her phone down, her eyes flashing with a fire I both admired and feared. "Fine, I'll go put on my costume." She stormed up the stairs. The drive to the church was silent. The Kingdom of Light was less a building and more a campus. A 20,000-seat auditorium, a state-of-the-art television production studio, a coffee shop, a bookstore, and acres of pristine parking lots. As we pulled into David's reserved spot near the main entrance, I could see the river of people flowing in, their faces full of hope and expectation. They were coming to be fed, and my husband was the one serving the meal. Inside, the energy was electric. The sound of the worship band practicing thrummed through the walls. We walked through the backstage corridors, a world of technicians, volunteers, and staff who scurried to make way for us. "Pastor, great to see you. Mrs. Miller, you look lovely today." The greetings were a blur. My smile was starting to ache. Then I saw her, Rebecca Vance, the choir director. She was young, barely 25, with a fiery ambition that matched her red hair. She was talking to one of the sound technicians, but her eyes lit up when she saw David. "Pastor Miller," she said, her voice a little too bright. She rushed over, placing a hand on his arm that lingered for a moment too long. "The choir is sounding truly anointed this morning. I think you'll be pleased." "I am always pleased with your work, Rebecca," David said, his smile broadening. "You have a true gift for bringing out the spirit in the music." He was looking at her, but I could feel his words were a message to me, a reminder of my own inadequacies, my own lack of spirit. Rebecca was everything I wasn't anymore, young, vibrant, and utterly captivated by him. I had seen the way they looked at each other during rehearsals, the private jokes, the shared glances that screamed of a world I was not a part of. The $5,000 charge at the jewelry store flashed in my mind. As they spoke, my eyes met those of Maria Rodriguez across the hall. Maria had been the church's bookkeeper for 30 years. She was a quiet, devout woman who treated the church's finances as if they were a sacred trust. Lately, I had seen a deep-seated fear in her eyes whenever David was near. She gave me a tiny, almost imperceptible nod, then quickly looked away, her hands twisting the strap of her purse. It was a signal. We had a plan, a terrifying, desperate plan. David finally disengaged from Rebecca, and we continued to his private office, a lavish suite with leather chairs and a view of the prayer garden. "I need a few moments to prepare my spirit," he announced, as he always did. This was my cue to leave, to go and sit in the front row where I belonged, the perfect, supportive wife. But today was different. "David, I need to talk to you," I said, my voice trembling slightly. He was already shuffling his notes, his focus elsewhere. "Later, Sarah Grace, the service is about to begin. Whatever it is can wait." "No," I said, the word feeling foreign and powerful on my tongue. "It can't." He looked up, annoyed. "What is so important that it cannot wait an hour?" My heart was pounding against my ribs like a trapped bird. This wasn't the plan. The plan was to meet Maria, to get the final proof, and then I didn't know. But his dismissal, his casual disregard after the scene with Rebecca, it lit a fuse. I saw the credit card bill, David. His face hardened. "We've discussed this. It was a donor gift, a token of appreciation for a family in need." The charge was from Tiffany & Co. Who was the needy family, David? Did they need a diamond necklace to lift their spirits? He took a step toward me, his 6'4" frame seeming to suck all the air out of the room. He lowered his voice to a menacing whisper, the public pastor gone, replaced by the man I knew in private. "You are treading on very dangerous ground. You will go out there, you will sit in your seat, and you will smile. You will perform your duties as my wife. After the service, we will have a very serious conversation about your lack of faith and your baseless accusations. Do you understand me?" The threat was clear. It wasn't the first time. The bruises on my soul were far older and deeper than any physical mark he could leave. But this time, his threat didn't produce fear. It produced a cold, terrifying clarity, I looked him straight in the eye. My own smile was gone, replaced by something I hadn't felt in years: resolve. "I understand perfectly," I said. I turned and walked out of the office, my back straight, my head held high. I didn't go to my seat. I walked down the hall to the small, windowless accounting office where I knew Maria would be waiting. She was there, her face pale, a manila folder clutched in her hands. When she saw me, she flinched. "He knows," I whispered, closing the door behind me. "He doesn't know what I know, but he's angry." "Mrs. Miller, maybe we should wait," Maria stammered, her eyes wide with fear. "It's a powerful man. He could ruin me, he could ruin you." "He's already ruined me, Maria," I said, my voice steady. "What he doesn't know is that ruin can be a kind of freedom. Do you have it?" She hesitated for a moment, then pushed the folder across the desk. "It's all here. The offshore accounts, the wire transfers disguised as mission funding, receipts for hotel rooms in Cancun, a lease for an apartment downtown, it's all in her name, Rebecca Vance." She also handed me a small flash drive. "And these are copies of his emails. He wasn't even careful." I opened the folder. My hands were shaking, but my vision was sharp. Page after page of methodical, calculated theft. Not just from the church, but from me, from our life, from the God he claimed to serve. The emails were worse. Declarations of love, promises of a future, intimate details that made my stomach turn. It was a betrayal so complete, so profound, it almost felt unreal. From the main auditorium, I heard the music swell. The service was starting. Through the office's small security monitor, I could see David walking onto the stage to a roar of applause. He raised his hands, a benevolent king greeting his adoring subjects. Maria was crying softly. "What are you going to do?" I looked at the evidence in my hands, then at the image of my husband on the screen, his face a mask of pious sincerity. For 20 years, I had helped him build this kingdom on a foundation of lies. I had smiled, I had supported, I had stayed silent. I had been a good wife, a good Christian woman, but God is not a God of lies, and silence is a sin of its own. I put the flash drive in my pocket. "I'm going to do what a pastor's wife is supposed to do," I said, my voice filled with a strength I didn't know I possessed. "I'm going to testify." I walked out of the office and headed not for my seat in the front row, but for the side of the stage. The sermon had begun. David's voice was booming, weaving a story of redemption and sacrifice. I waited in the wings, my heart a steady, determined drumbeat. After the sermon came the part of the service called the Testimony of the Faithful, where members of the congregation could share their stories. It was usually carefully curated. David's voice filled the auditorium. "And now we are blessed to hear from someone whose quiet strength and unwavering faith is a beacon to us all. A woman who walks in grace every single day. Please welcome my beautiful, wonderful wife, Sarah Grace Miller." The spotlight swung to find me. The applause was deafening. Thousands of smiling faces turned toward me. They saw the perfect wife, the serene First Lady. They had no idea the woman walking toward the pulpit was not there to build the kingdom up, but to burn it to the ground. Walking into the spotlight felt like stepping from a cold shadow into a sudden, blinding heat. The applause washed over me, a wave of adoration meant for an illusion. For a brief, terrifying second, my legs felt weak. Every instinct screamed at me to turn back, to retreat to the safety of my assigned role, to the gilded cage I knew so well. But then I saw David's face on the giant jumbotron screens flanking the stage. He was beaming, his smile a grotesque caricature of pride. He thought this was his victory. He had put me in my place, and now I was coming to the stage to perform my part, to be the docile, supportive wife, perhaps to share a manufactured anecdote about his boundless wisdom. That smile was all the fuel I needed. My heels clicked with a steady, resolute rhythm on the polished stage floor. The pulpit was made of shimmering acrylic, designed to look modern and transparent, as if to suggest there were no secrets here. What a lie. I reached the pulpit and turned to face the sea of faces. 20,000 people, their eyes fixed on me. In the front row, I saw Caleb, his face glowing with pride for his mother. Beside him, Hannah was staring at me, a flicker of confusion and something else, curiosity, in her eyes. She knew I never volunteered for testimonies. Further down the row, Elder Abernathy gave me a warm, encouraging smile. He had no idea what was coming. David moved to stand beside me, placing a proprietary hand on the small of my back. "The floor is yours, my love," he whispered, his breath smelling faintly of the mints he chewed to keep his sermon voice clear. I took a deep breath, the air conditioning chilling my skin. I did not look at my husband. I looked directly into the camera lens that was broadcasting my face to millions more at home. "Good morning, brothers and sisters," I began, my voice surprisingly steady. It didn't sound like my own voice. It was stronger, clearer, stripped of the gentle tremor I'd developed over the years. Pastor Miller is right. I am a woman of faith, and my faith teaches me that the truth shall set you free. A murmur of agreement rippled through the crowd. David squeezed my back gently, a silent bravo. For 20 years, I continued, my gaze sweeping across the auditorium, I have stood by this man. I have raised our children in this church. I have poured my heart and my soul into what I believed was the work of the Lord. And I, like you, have been inspired by his words, moved by his passion. I paused, letting the weight of my history hang in the air. David was nodding along, a self-satisfied expression on his face. He was enjoying this. But my faith also teaches me that a house built on sand cannot stand, and a ministry built on lies is an abomination in the eyes of God. The atmosphere shifted instantly. The murmurs died. A tense silence fell over the massive room. I felt David's hand on my back stiffen. His smile faltered. Out of the corner of my eye, I could see his jaw clenching. "What are you doing?" he hissed, his voice a venomous whisper only I could hear. I ignored him, gripping the sides of the transparent pulpit. "I came here today to give a testimony, but it is not a testimony of manufactured grace. It is a testimony of truth, the kind of truth that is ugly and painful and absolutely necessary." I pulled the flash drive from my pocket. It was small and black, but it felt as heavy as a stone. I turned to the sound booth at the back of the auditorium, where a young man named Leo, one of Hannah's few friends at the church, was working. He was a tech genius, and the only person I knew I could trust. I had spoken to him in hushed tones yesterday, giving him a vague story about wanting to surprise David with a photo montage. He had looked at me with his perceptive eyes and simply said, "Whatever you need, Mrs. Miller, the system is yours." "Leo," I said into the microphone, my voice ringing with authority, "please bring up the files on this drive. The folder is labeled The Lord's Work." David grabbed my arm. "Sarah Grace, stop this. This is not the time or the place." His grip was like iron. "Let go of me, David," I said, my voice low but firm, not turning to look at him. The screens, which moments before had shown his beatific face, flickered to black. The entire congregation held its breath. Then, the first image appeared. It was a bank statement, a wire transfer for $50,000 from the Uganda Mission Fund to an account in the Cayman Islands, an account named DM Enterprises. A collective gasp went through the auditorium. "For the past 5 years," I announced, my voice amplifying the silence, "my husband, Pastor David Miller, has been systematically embezzling funds from this church. Money you have given in good faith, money you thought was going to build orphanages and feed the hungry, has instead been funding a lifestyle of obscene luxury." The next image flashed on the screen, the deed to a beachfront property in Cancun. Then another, receipts for luxury cars. Then another, the $5,000 receipt from Tiffany & Co. David's face was ashen. He let go of my arm, stumbling back a step as if I had physically struck him. "This is a lie," he shouted into his own lapel mic, his voice cracking. My wife is not well. She is confused. These are fabricated documents." I saw Caleb leap to his feet in the front row, his face a mask of horrified disbelief. "Dad, what is this?" Hannah was just staring, her mouth slightly open, finally seeing the validation of all her unspoken doubts. "I assure you I am perfectly well," I said calmly. "And the documents are very real. Maria Rodriguez, our bookkeeper for the last 30 years, can attest to their authenticity. She is the one who bravely brought them to my attention." I scanned the crowd looking for Maria. She wasn't visible, but I knew she was watching. David was scrambling now, his charisma evaporating into raw panic. "This is a conspiracy. A test from Satan himself to destroy our ministry. Elder Abernathy, you know me, tell them." Elder Abernathy was on his feet, his kind face stricken with shock and sorrow. He looked from the screen to David, then to me. He looked lost. He had suspected, he had worried, but he had never imagined this. "But this is not just a story about greed," I said, my voice dropping, becoming more personal. "Because the theft of your money is only part of the betrayal. The more profound sin is the theft of trust, the violation of sacred vows." I nodded to Leo. The next image appeared. It was a photo. A candid shot of David and Rebecca Vance, the choir director, sitting at an intimate table at a fancy restaurant. He was holding her hand, his head tilted toward her, laughing. It was a look of affection he hadn't given me in a decade. A wave of shock and outrage, louder this time, swept through the congregation. I could see members of the choir in their designated section, their faces a mixture of horror and dawning comprehension. "For the past 18 months," I said, the words tasting like ash in my mouth, My husband has been engaged in an adulterous affair with Miss Rebecca Vance. Rebecca, who was standing near the choir, let out a small cry and buried her face in her hands. He used your tithes to buy her gifts, I continued, my voice merciless. He used your offerings to lease her an apartment. He preached to you about fidelity from this very pulpit on Sunday and then spent Sunday night in her bed. The final slide appeared on the screen. It was not a picture, it was text, an email from David's account to Rebecca. The subject line read, "Our future." My voice trembled as I read his words aloud for the entire world to hear. My dearest Rebecca, soon this will all be behind us. The promotion of the kingdom requires certain sacrifices in the present. Sarah Grace has become a burden to the ministry, a woman without vision or passion. Once the new fundraising campaign is complete, I will have the grounds to file for divorce. The congregation will see it as a necessary sorrow, a shepherd freeing himself to better serve his flock. And then, my love, you and I can build our true kingdom together. All my love, D. The silence that followed was absolute. It was a dead, hollow silence, the sound of 20,000 hearts breaking at once. The sound of an empire of faith crumbling into dust. In that moment, David did not look like a pastor. He looked like a cornered animal. His eyes darted around, searching for an escape, an ally, anything. But he found only a sea of stunned, betrayed faces. His flock had become his jury. He lunged for me then, not for the microphone, but for me. A guttural roar escaped his lips as he tried to grab the flash drive from my hand. "You witch, you will not destroy me." But before he could reach me, two figures moved faster. The first was Elder Abernathy, who, despite his age, stepped between us with surprising speed. The second was my son, Caleb. He vaulted onto the stage, his face streaked with tears of rage and disillusionment. "Get away from her," Caleb screamed at his father, shoving him back. "Don't you touch her." The sight of my son defending me against my husband, his lifelong hero, was the final, devastating blow. The facade was not just cracked, it was shattered into a million irreparable pieces. Security guards rushed the stage. The cameras, which had been broadcasting every horrifying second, finally cut to a static blue screen with the church's logo. The live feed was over, but the reckoning had just begun. It was then that the first voice from the crowd, a man in the third row, shouted, "Shame!" Another joined in. "Fraud!" Then more. "Liar! Thief! Adulterer!" The sanctuary, a place of reverent worship, had transformed into a courtroom. The chants grew louder, a cacophony of righteous anger. Elder Abernathy took the main microphone. His hands were shaking, but his voice was firm. "Brothers and sisters, please let us have order." He waited for the noise to subside slightly. His eyes, filled with a deep, profound sadness, found mine. He gave a single, solemn nod of understanding. Then he turned to face the congregation. "For years, some of us on the council have had concerns. We have prayed for guidance. We have sought the truth. It seems today, the truth has found us." He took a deep breath. "In light of the evidence presented by Sister Sarah Grace, and in accordance with the bylaws of the Kingdom of Light Tabernacle, I hereby call for an immediate vote of the Board of Elders on the matter of the removal of David Miller as senior pastor." The world backstage was chaos. As soon as the cameras cut, the jumbotrons went dark, plunging the stage into a disorienting twilight, pierced only by the harsh, functional work lights. The angry shouts from the congregation became a muffled roar, the sound of a distant, caged beast. Security guards, their faces grim and professional, surrounded David, who stood panting like a winded bull, his eyes wild with fury and disbelief. He wasn't looking at the guards, he was looking at me, a look so filled with hatred it felt like a physical blow. Caleb stood protectively in front of me, his young body tense, a human shield against the man he had idolized his entire life. Hannah had somehow made her way onto the stage and was now at my side, her hand gripping mine with a strength I didn't know she possessed. Her face was pale, but her eyes were clear and steady. For the first time in years, I felt we were a unit, a fractured family reforming in the rubble. "You've destroyed everything," David spat, his voice no longer the resonant baritone of a pastor but the raw, ragged snarl of a defeated man. "Everything we built. For what? Spite." "No, David," I said, my voice quiet but carrying in the tense space between us. "I didn't destroy it. You did. You just built the facade so high, it took 20 years for the rot to show through. This isn't destruction. It's demolition. There's a difference." One of the security guards, a large man named Frank who had always treated me with gentle respect, stepped forward. "Pastor Miller, sir, I think it's best if you come with us to your office." "Don't you sir me?" David roared, swatting the man's hand away. "I am the head of this church. You work for me." "Not anymore, you don't," a new voice said. Elder Abernathy had come backstage, followed by 2 other senior elders, their faces like stone masks. The board has voted, unanimously. You are suspended, effective immediately, pending a full financial and ethical investigation. You are to vacate the premises now. The finality in the elder's tone seemed to finally pierce David's rage. His shoulders slumped. He looked suddenly smaller, older. The power, the anointing, the divine right he had claimed for so long had been stripped away from him in a matter of minutes, and without it, he was just a man in an expensive suit. "Sarah Grace," he said, his voice dropping to a near whisper, a last-ditch attempt at manipulation. "Think of the children, think of our name, we can fix this, quietly." "You lost the right to speak their names when you chose your ambition over their well-being," I replied coldly, "and my name is the one thing I'm getting back today." He stared at me for a long moment, and in his eyes, I saw the final shift from denial to a cold, calculated fury. It was the look of a man who had lost a war and was now planning the insurgency. He turned without another word and let the guards escort him away, a king being led from his fallen castle. Once he was gone, the tension on the stage broke. Hannah wrapped her arms around me, burying her face in my shoulder. "I knew it," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "I always knew something was wrong. I'm so sorry I never said anything." "SHHH, baby," I murmured, stroking her hair. "You didn't have to. I'm sorry I made you live with it for so long." Caleb turned to me, his face a mess of confusion and pain. "Mom, the money, the affair, is it all true, all of it?" I met his gaze, my heart aching for his shattered world. I would not lie to him, not anymore. "Yes, Caleb, it's all true." He let out a sob, a raw, wounded sound, and pulled me into a hug, sandwiching Hannah between us. We stood there for a long moment, a broken trio clinging to each other in the aftermath of the explosion. Elder Abernathy approached us quietly. "Sarah Grace," he said, his voice gentle, "I am so profoundly sorry, for my blindness, for our failure to protect you in this church." "You didn't fail, Thomas," I said, pulling back from my children. "You just trusted, we all did." "We need to secure the financial records immediately," he said, his expression turning practical. "Before he or his allies can destroy them. Maria is with my wife Martha. She's safe, but she's terrified." "I need to see her," I said. The elders' lounge, usually a place of quiet prayer and coffee, was now a makeshift command center. Maria was huddled in a corner, being comforted by Martha Abernathy, a woman with a spine of steel and a heart of gold. When Maria saw me, she burst into fresh tears. "I was so scared," she wept as I knelt beside her. When he looked out into the crowd, I thought he could see me. I thought he would send someone. "You're safe now, Maria," I said, taking her trembling hands. "What you did today, you saved this church. You were braver than all of us." "No," she said, shaking her head and looking at me with awe. "You were the brave one. You were Daniel in the lion's den." The next few hours were a blur of hushed meetings, frantic phone calls, and legal consultations. The elders moved with surprising efficiency. They brought in a forensic accounting firm that very afternoon. They changed the locks on David's office and secured all the church's servers. They drafted a statement to be released to the press, which was already gathering like vultures outside the main gates. Through it all, I felt strangely calm. The adrenaline had faded, leaving behind a profound sense of rightness. I was operating on a reserve of strength I never knew I had. My primary concern was my children. I sent them home with Martha, not wanting them to be exposed to the media circus. "What will we do, Mom?" Caleb asked before he left, his eyes still red-rimmed. "Where will we live? The mansion, the cars, the life we knew, it all belonged to the church. We were, for all intents and purposes, homeless." I squeezed his hand. "We will figure it out, together. The most important thing is that we're free." The word felt strange and wonderful. Late that afternoon, as I was giving a formal statement to the church's lawyers, my phone buzzed. It was a text from an unknown number. "You think you've won, you have no idea what's coming for you. You will be left with nothing. He will make sure of it." I didn't need to ask who he was or who the sender was. I knew it was from Rebecca or someone loyal to David. The threat was a cold splash of reality. This was far from over. David wasn't just going to disappear. He would fight back, and he would fight dirty. He knew all my secrets, all my vulnerabilities. He would try to paint me as an unstable, vindictive woman, a scorned wife on a rampage. He would use our children as pawns. The legal battle would be brutal. I showed the text to Elder Abernathy. He read it, his lips thinning into a grim line. "This is what I feared," he said. "David's power was never just in the pulpit. It's in the network he built, the influential people who owe him favors. He won't go down without trying to burn everything around him." "He can't burn the truth," I said, though a sliver of the old fear returned. No, Thomas agreed. But he can try to bury it in lies. We need to be prepared. Sarah Grace, the church will provide for you and the children, of course. A place to stay, financial support, but you're going to need more than that. You're going to need a different kind of army. That evening, I finally left the church campus, slipping out a back exit to avoid the news vans. Martha drove me to a small, unassuming guest house the church owned, where my children were waiting. The place was simple, clean, and blessedly quiet. After I tucked a still fragile Caleb and a silent, watchful Hannah into bed, I sat alone in the small living room. The silence was deafening. For 20 years, my life had been a constant hum of activity, of schedules, of duties, of David's presence filling every space. Now there was just me. I thought about the text message, about David's threat, about the long, hard road ahead. For a moment, a wave of overwhelming exhaustion and fear washed over me. What had I done? Had I been brave, or had I been reckless? Had I freed my family, or had I just thrown them into a different kind of storm? I walked to the window and looked out at the unfamiliar suburban street. My reflection was faint in the dark glass. I saw a woman of 42 with nothing to her name but her children and a story. The woman in the mirror was no longer the First Lady of the Kingdom of Light. She was just Sarah Grace. And for the first time, I had to figure out who that was. My phone rang. It was an unknown number, but something told me to answer it. "Is this Sarah Grace Miller?" a woman's voice asked. It was crisp and professional. "Yes, it is. My name is Jessica Thorne. I'm a reporter with the Houston Chronicle. I know you're not giving statements, and I respect that. I'm not calling about that. I'm calling because I was a member of your church 10 years ago." I was confused. "Okay, 10 years ago," she continued, her voice taking on a harder edge, "your husband offered me private spiritual counseling. I was 22 and new to the city. What he offered was not counseling. I left the church in shame and never looked back. I'm one of many, Mrs. Miller, and I think it's time our stories were told, not in a tabloid, but as a testament to the kind of power that men like your husband wield, the kind of power you stood up to today. I want to help you." I sank into a chair, the phone pressed hard against my ear. It wasn't just about money. It wasn't just about one affair. It was a pattern, a history of abuse hidden behind a holy facade. David's network of allies was powerful, but I was beginning to realize I had an army of my own, an army of silent, wounded women who were just waiting for a voice, and today I had given them one. The battle had just begun, but for the first time, I knew I wasn't fighting it alone. The days that followed were a maelstrom. My face was everywhere, on the front page of the Houston Chronicle under Jessica Thorne's byline, on cable news channels where pundits debated the fall of a spiritual titan, and across social media where the hashtag testimony of truth went viral. I became a symbol overnight, a reluctant icon for some, a Jezebel figure for others. David's remaining loyalists, a vocal and well-funded minority, launched a vicious smear campaign. They dug up every misstep of my life, a difficult period in my teens, a college photo where I was holding a beer, my mother's struggles with depression, and twisted it all into a narrative that I was a mentally unstable, vengeful woman who had conspired to bring down a good man of God. "They're trying to build a cage of lies around you, Sarah Grace," Jessica Thorne told me during one of our hushed phone calls. We had become unlikely allies, our conversations a mix of legal strategy and shared trauma. Her exposé had opened the floodgates. 3 more women had come forward with stories of David's private counseling sessions, each one more disturbing than the last. The only way to break out is to keep speaking the truth, louder and clearer than their lies. Living in the church guest house felt like being in a gilded witness protection program. We were safe, cared for by the Abernathys and a small circle of trusted church members, but we were isolated. Caleb struggled the most. His entire worldview had been incinerated. He spent hours locked in his room, refusing to talk to his youth ministry friends who were now divided into factions. One evening, I found him sitting on his bed, staring at a photo of him and David on a mission trip. "He taught me everything," Caleb said, his voice hollow. "How to pray, how to lead, how to be a man. Was all of it a lie? Was I just a prop for him too?" My heart broke for him. I sat beside him, the silence stretching between us. "The things he taught you about faith, about helping others, those weren't the lies, Caleb. The lie was the man himself. He knew the words, but he didn't live the song. You can still live the song. You can be the man he only pretended to be." He looked at me, his eyes searching mine. "How?" "Everyone at church either pities me or thinks I'm a traitor for standing with you." "Then maybe your ministry isn't meant to be inside those walls right now," I said softly. Maybe it's right here, helping your sister, helping your mom. That's a ministry too, and it's the most important one there is. Hannah, on the other hand, was galvanized. The quiet rebel had found her voice. She spent hours online, not scrolling aimlessly, but fighting back. She became a fierce digital warrior, debunking the lies being spread about me, sharing articles from credible sources, and connecting with other children of disgraced pastors who had lived through similar experiences. "They have a whole network, Mom," she told me one night, her laptop glowing in the dark. "Kids who were taught to be silent, to protect the family ministry at all costs. We're starting a support group, a place to talk about it without being judged." She looked up at me, her youthful cynicism replaced by a steely determination. "What you did, it wasn't just for you. It was for us. It was for them." The legal battle was escalating. David had hired a notoriously aggressive lawyer, a man named Marcus Thorne, no relation to Jessica, a cruel irony, who specialized in high-profile divorces and character assassination. The first shot was fired when I was served with divorce papers and a motion for sole custody of Hannah, citing my emotional instability and parental alienation. "It's a classic bully tactic," my own lawyer, a sharp, empathetic woman named Alina Vance, who was provided pro bono by a women's advocacy group, told me. "He's trying to scare you into a settlement, to make you give up and go away quietly." We were in her downtown office, the city skyline a backdrop of steel and glass. "He's not going to get the kids, is he?" I asked, the fear a cold knot in my stomach. It was my deepest, most primal terror. Alina looked me straight in the eye. "Not a chance in hell, Sarah Grace. He threatened you in front of 200 witnesses and on a live broadcast. He's facing multiple lawsuits for sexual misconduct. He's the subject of a federal investigation for fraud. A judge would have to be certifiably insane to grant him custody. This is just noise. Our job is to stay focused on the signal." The signal was the forensic audit. The team of accountants, led by a methodical man named Mr. Chen, had been working around the clock. They were peeling back the layers of David's financial empire like an onion, and every layer revealed more rot. He had shell corporations, offshore accounts, and a complex system of kickbacks from church contractors. The amount of money stolen was not in the thousands, but in the millions. The church itself was in turmoil. Attendance had plummeted. The elders were trying to hold things together, with Thomas Abernathy serving as interim pastor, but the heart of the community had been ripped out. One Sunday, Martha Abernathy convinced me to attend a small, private service she was holding in the church chapel for a handful of shell-shocked members. As I slipped into a back pew, a woman I had known for years, someone whose children had grown up with mine, turned and glared at me with pure venom. "You should be ashamed," she hissed. "You tore down the house of God for your own selfish pride." Before I could respond, another woman, a single mother I knew had received financial help from the church, leaned across the aisle. "She didn't tear it down," she said fiercely. "She opened the windows and let the light in so we could see the rot. Thank you, Sarah Grace." The encounter left me shaking. I was a fault line, and the congregation was cracking along the division I had created. The turning point came from an unexpected source. It came from Rebecca Vance. 2 weeks into the scandal, after being fired from the church and publicly shamed, she disappeared. Her family claimed she had left the state. David's camp painted her as a vulnerable young woman who had been manipulated by me. Then, Jessica Thorne got a call. Rebecca wanted to talk. The three of us met in a neutral location, a nondescript hotel coffee shop. Rebecca looked tired and fragile, stripped of her usual confident glow. She had been hiding out, terrified of David's threats. "He told me you were divorced," she said, her voice barely a whisper, not looking at me. "He showed me papers. He said it was finalized, but you were staying in the house for the sake of the children until they finished the school year. He said you were difficult, but that he was handling it with Christian grace." "The papers were fake, Rebecca," I said gently. She finally looked at me, her eyes swimming with tears. "I know that now. I was stupid. I was ambitious. He promised me everything. A record deal with the church's label, a co-pastor position. He made me feel like I was the most special woman in the world." "He has a gift for that," I said dryly. "When you exposed everything," she continued, "he called me. He wasn't comforting. He was monstrous. He said if I ever spoke a word of what I knew, he would release videos of us. He said he would destroy my reputation, my family, everything. He said I would never work in this town again. It was the classic abuser's playbook: isolate, manipulate, and threaten. "What do you want, Rebecca?" Jessica asked, her reporter's instincts sharp. Rebecca took a shaky breath. "I want to come clean, not just about the affair, about the money. I helped him. I co-signed on some of the accounts. I let him use my name for the apartment lease. I knew it was wrong, but I was so caught up in him, in the power, I'm willing to testify against him, in exchange for immunity. It was a bombshell. Her testimony would be the nail in David's coffin, corroborating the financial trail and painting a clear picture of his manipulative character. Why now? I asked, genuinely curious. She looked down at her hands. My mother called me yesterday. She saw one of the stories about the other women, the ones he counseled. And she said to me, that man is a predator, and you can either be one of his victims, or you can be one of the women who stopped him. I don't want to be a victim anymore. As we left the hotel, Elinor was already on the phone with the district attorney's office. Rebecca's testimony, combined with the forensic audit and the statements from the other women, was enough. The DA was preparing to file criminal charges. That night, for the first time in weeks, I felt a flicker of hope that went beyond simple survival. It felt like the tide was turning. I was sitting with Hannah, watching the late news, when a special report came on. We have breaking news tonight in the Kingdom of Light scandal, the anchorwoman said. Sources confirm that the Harris County District Attorney is preparing to issue an arrest warrant for Pastor David Miller on multiple felony charges, including fraud, embezzlement, and racketeering. Hannah grabbed my hand and squeezed. We watched, mesmerized, as the screen showed live footage from outside our old home, the church mansion. A fleet of police cars and unmarked vehicles were pulling up, their lights flashing silently in the darkness. They're going to arrest him, Hannah whispered in awe. I couldn't speak. I just watched as law enforcement officers, armed with a warrant, streamed toward the front door of the house I had once called home. The kingdom was falling, and the king was about to be put in chains. The demolition was almost complete. Now, the hard work of rebuilding could begin. The image of David being led out of our home in handcuffs will be forever burned into my memory. He didn't look like a pastor or a king. He looked like a common criminal, his face illuminated by the cold, flashing blue and red lights of the police cars. There was no defiance left, only a sallow, hollowed-out shock. The mask was finally, irrevocably gone. Watching it on the news, with Hannah's hand in mine and Caleb sitting silently beside us, I didn't feel triumph. I felt a profound, aching sadness. Not for him, but for the life I thought I had, for the years lost to a lie, for the innocence stolen from my children. It was the closing of a painful 20-year chapter. The aftermath was swift and brutal for David. With Rebecca's testimony, the mountain of financial evidence, and the chorus of other women's voices, his legal defense crumbled. He was denied bail. The church officially excommunicated him, a move that was more symbolic than anything else. His powerful friends vanished, scattering like cockroaches when the lights are turned on. His legacy was erased, his name becoming a cautionary tale whispered in seminaries and boardrooms across the country. For us, it was the beginning of a different kind of journey. The world no longer saw me as just a wife or a victim, they saw me as a survivor. Church, under Elder Abernathy's steady leadership, began a painful but necessary process of reform. They established an independent oversight committee, rewrote the financial bylaws, and, in a move that shocked many, publicly apologized to me, to the other women David had harmed, and to the congregation for their collective failure of governance. As part of the settlement, the church provided us with a modest but comfortable home in a quiet neighborhood far from the shadows of the megachurch campus. They also established a trust for Caleb and Hannah's education. It wasn't an act of charity, Thomas explained to me, but an act of restitution. The most important rebuilding, however, was happening within the walls of our new home. We started going to family therapy. Caleb, slowly, began to untangle his identity from his father's. He decided to take a year off from seminary and started volunteering at a local homeless shelter, rediscovering his faith not in a grand auditorium, but in the simple act of serving others. "I want to help people, Mom," he told me one day. "For real this time. No cameras, no spotlights." Hannah flourished. She became a passionate advocate, using her online platform to create a safe space for children of abusive parents, especially those in high-control religious environments. She was accepted into a prestigious journalism program, her application essay a powerful reflection on truth and accountability. I saw in her the woman I might have become if I hadn't silenced my own voice for so long. And me? I found my purpose in the wreckage. The story of my testimony had resonated deeply, and I was inundated with messages from women all over the world who saw themselves in my story. They were wives of pastors, politicians, CEOs, women trapped in gilded cages, their identities subsumed by their powerful husbands. With the encouragement of Jessica, Eleanor, and the Abernathys, I started a foundation. We called it the Sarah Grace Project. Its mission was simple: to provide resources, legal, financial, and emotional, for women seeking to escape abusive situations, particularly those where the abuser's public image made it difficult to be believed. We didn't offer just a safe house, we offered a war chest. We assembled a network of pro bono lawyers, forensic accountants, and therapists. We taught women how to gather evidence, how to protect themselves financially, and how to find their voice. My life became a whirlwind of fundraising, public speaking, and late-night calls with terrified women who just needed to hear someone say, "I believe you." I went back to school and finished my degree in social work. The quiet, smiling pastor's wife was gone. In her place was a woman I finally recognized, strong, flawed, and fiercely alive. About a year after David's arrest, I was asked to give the keynote speech at a national conference on women's empowerment. I stood on a stage, not unlike the one at the Kingdom of Light, but this time, the spotlight felt warm, not interrogating. The audience was filled with faces of survivors, advocates, and allies. For many years, I began, my voice clear and confident, I lived in a beautiful house built on a rotten foundation. I smiled when I was crying inside. I kept silent when I should have screamed. I did this because I was told that this was the price of peace, the cost of a godly home. But I learned that the silence that buys a false peace is a prison. True peace is not the absence of conflict, it is the presence of justice. I looked out at the crowd, at the nodding heads and tear-streaked faces. The hardest step is the first one. The moment you decide that your truth is more important than their comfort. The moment you choose yourself, it will be terrifying. They will call you a liar. They will call you crazy. They will try to take everything from you. But what they cannot take is your voice once you have truly found it. My story did not end when my husband was led away in handcuffs. I continued, my voice swelling with a passion I had never known before. That was not the victory. The victory is in the quiet moments. It's watching my son find his own, true faith in service. It's hearing my daughter's laughter fill our small home. It's looking in the mirror and seeing not a victim, but a woman who fought for her soul and won. The victory is knowing that my children will grow up in a home where love is not a performance and strength is not measured in silence. I concluded, your testimony matters. Your truth has the power to shatter foundations, topple kingdoms, and most importantly, to set you free. Don't just speak your truth, become your truth. Live it, breathe it, and use it to light the way for others who are still lost in the dark. That is the greatest ministry of all. The standing ovation was thunderous, but it wasn't the applause that moved me. It was the sight of women in the audience turning to each other, hugging, crying, and finding strength in a shared understanding. Later that evening, sitting in my quiet hotel room, I got a call from Caleb. "Hey Mom," he said, his voice bright. "Just wanted to say hi. Hannah and I made dinner. It wasn't great, but we didn't burn the house down." I laughed. "That's a win in my book. How was your day at the shelter?" "It was good. Hard, but good. You know, Mom, I listened to your speech online. It was amazing. I'm so proud of you." Tears welled in my eyes. "I'm proud of you too, Caleb, so proud." After we hung up, I walked to the window and looked out at the glittering city lights. My life was not what I had ever imagined it would be. It was smaller in scale, but infinitely larger in meaning. I hadn't just exposed a lie. I had found a deeper, more resilient truth. I had learned that faith isn't about the size of the church, but the strength of your spirit. I had learned that a family is not about a perfect image, but about an unbreakable bond of love and respect. And I had learned that sometimes the most powerful prayer is not a whisper, but a roar that says, "No more," a roar that reclaims your name, and I was Sarah Grace, and I was finally free.